Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Facebook Live Health Talk. Today, I am excited to introduce Mary Sumner. She's our occupational therapist with SSM Health, St. Anthony's, and she's going to talk to you guys today about some common pickleball injuries and how to deal with those. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mary and hope you guys enjoy it and have a great day.
Well, hello and good noon, everybody. First and foremost, thank you, Miss Tanessa, for introducing me, and thank you, listeners, for tuning in. I'm very excited to be here. Like Tanessa said, my name is Mary Sumner. I'm an occupational therapist and a certified hand therapist. I have recently opened a clinic alongside OSOI at St. Anthony's Midtown location. And although my area of practice may be hand therapy, I am very passionate about getting people involved in meaningful activities. So, case in point, I'm an avid long-distance runner. Specifically, I really love to run the Oklahoma City Memorial Marathon. I love it so much, in fact, that I had the opportunity to help coach a running group this last spring. And although the race did not go as planned, I very much enjoyed helping runners complete their goal of crossing that finish line. So, love running. I also love riding bikes in the dirt. And I absolutely love to hike. And all this to say, the information that I'm going to provide you with today is not only backed by my schooling, but also by some life experiences. So today we're talking about surviving pickleball, a look at how to keep common injuries from sidelining your game. So why are we talking about pickleball today? Besides the fact that so many people at this wellness center enjoy playing it, pickleball is one of the fastest growing sports in the nation. Since its inception in 1965, pickleball has found its way into every state in the USA and is growing in popularity overseas. Inventors Joel Pritchard, Bill Bell, and Barney McCollum wanted to keep their families entertained while on a summer holiday. And while they didn't have quite enough equipment to get a game of badminton going, they did end up inventing a pretty fun party game. So, a lot of players say it's easy to pick up, it's social, anyone can play, and games can range from casual to competitive, going all the way up to tournaments and leagues. So, usapickleball.org states, it's easy to start, but hard to stop. So as an occupational therapist, I am thrilled. This is a game that engages the mind, the body, and can be played by anyone across the lifespan. So my question is, how do we keep folks in the game injury-free for as long as possible? And the answer to that question is to look at what causes players to stop in the first place. Now today I am speaking to injury prevention, and the two types of injuries that sideline players most often are acute injuries and chronic injuries. Acute injuries having a more sudden onset and chronic injuries being more insidious and long-term. So what leads to an acute injury? Things like falls that land you on your hand, your head, your shoulders, your knees. Overuse, such as when you're using that wrist to really grip onto that paddle and whack it over and over. Compensation, such as when you're using your elbow or your shoulder to really whack that ball instead of using that entire body to swing through. And then fatigue. Now, I know a lot of people will think fatigue is in skeletal muscle, but I think we also need to talk a little bit about mental fatigue and the effects that can have on your game. More on that later. So acute injuries. How do we avoid them? Well, just like with any sport, it pays to have gear that fits your needs. I'm going to bring up this picture of this lovely man playing the game, and I don't know about you, but he looks like he is ready to rock his game. He's playing outside, so he's got sunglasses on. He also must be wearing sunscreen, I'm sure. It also looks like the clothes that he's playing in are loose enough to let him play and move around, but they're not so billowing they're distracting him or they're causing him to trip. I also like the fact that he's wearing gloves to prevent blistering, and it looks like maybe he's wearing a wrist strap just above that glove as well. The one thing I don't like about this picture is you can't see his feet. And as a runner, I know that a good pair of shoes is cheap insurance for the longevity in your sport. So let's think about the shoes that you wear on the court. How do they feel? If your shoes are too tight, you run the risk of blisters, bunions, and pain. But if your shoes are too big, you run the risk of even more blisters and, worst of all, falling. Last but not least, ask yourself, how old are my shoes? The rubber and foam in athletic shoes does break down over time, so make sure that your shoes still support you while you stand, walk, run, and lunge during your game. One quick and easy tip to assess your shoe age, flip them over. Look at the bottom. If they look brand new, they probably haven't been worn a ton. If they look like they're worn down like some old tires, it might be time to invest in some new ones. A good shoe can decrease your chance of leg pain and low back pain. So none of this, this is my yard work shoes. Get shoes that really support you. They'll keep you in the game longer. So next up is equipment. You might consider different paddles to play with. If you've noticed that you've been dropping your paddle or your wrist or elbow is sore after a game, using a lighter paddle may benefit you. It may be called tennis elbow, but lateral epicondylitis is seen in all racket sports, including pickleball. And that repetitive wrist extension and heavy grip can lead to symptoms of tennis elbow and carpal tunnel. So using a paddle that works for you is key. I also want you to pay attention to the man in the picture. He seems to have some sort of soft wrist support. I know I mentioned that earlier. And maybe that's part of his glove, or maybe it's a way to stabilize his wrist. And whether he found that support on his own or was educated about it via OT or PT, he's clearly made it part of his pickleball outfit so that he's taking care of his wrist even while he plays. And finally, down at the bottom, you guessed it, a water bottle. So as an endurance athlete, I could spend literal hours talking about the dangers of dehydration, but I won't today. Suffice it to say, if you are already thirsty, you're already dehydrated. And keeping hydrated will improve your overall health exponentially. So make sure you're having water and hydrating before the game, and keep a water bottle handy to keep from getting parched during your game. And the picture I've included is the cheapest of cheap water bottles you can get from any vending machine. So this is just a nice little reminder. You don't have to break the bank to get equipment that works for you, but you do have to find what you like and what you will use. Next up, match your fitness to your desired playing level. Now, this does take a little bit of introspection, so you might want to ask yourself, what do I need to up my game? Do I need more cardio endurance, more strength, more flexibility? If so, adding cardio, strength, and mobility training to your days off the court will greatly improve your performance on the court. Cross-training is the best way to address weaknesses and limitations throughout the body. So the Physical Activity Guidelines for Americans, second edition, recommends 150 minutes of moderate and aerobic activity per week. For you math nerds, that's 2.5 hours every week, or 30 minutes for 5 out of the 7 days. So let's say you play pickleball an hour a week. Let's be real, you probably play more because it's fun and exciting. But that leaves you with an hour and a half left to hit your targeted 2.5-hour goal. So think about it this way. Can you squeeze in a 30-minute walk for the 3 days that you're not on the court? Or maybe can you pick up a yoga class for an hour one day and work with weights for 30 minutes another day? Not only will your body gain strength and endurance, but you can improve your focus, your overall mood, and ability to recover in the long term. So I've included these pictures of weightlifting, and this next person is obviously doing some kind of aerobic activity, being running or walking. What I don't have a picture of, but what I feel like does need to be addressed, is mental fitness. And we all kind of tend to fall into this trap. We come to the court after a long, draining day, and maybe you notice that your swing is sloppy or your response time is dragging. Taking just 5 minutes to center yourself before you get into the game can help with your focus. And that can be anything from taking a walk, sitting quietly by yourself, or repeating a mantra to yourself a few times. Whatever works for you to show up fully present will help you keep focused during your game and a lot safer in the long run. It may sound cheesy, but even Olympic athletes need time to find their focus. A few mantras that I have heard throughout the years include things like breathe in and let it out. I've also heard, I've got this, I've got this. You might think of the little engine that could, I think I can, I think I can. All are great mantras and really help you focus the mind to the task at hand. Absolutely cheesy, but fixating on comfort words to yourself has been shown to clear the mind and sharpen the focus. Now this is the fun part, the warm-up and the cool-down. The two most often skipped parts of the game, but they make such an incredible difference. I say that I have a link below, but I have sent a link to Tanessa, and I have also printed off a couple of hard copies of some of my favorite warm-ups and cool-down. I think there's going to be a booth at the front where you check in with some more information about that. So if you are interested, go ahead and check that out. The most important piece of advice I can give on a warm-up is this. It's literally meant to just warm up the body. There's no need to go through an entire workout before you get on the pickleball court, but you do need to make certain that your muscles are warm and you're breathing in a rhythm that supports your playing. So I love to include walking or marching in any warm-up because it really ignites the larger muscles of the legs and the core, and it allows me to focus on breathing. And speaking of breathing, have you ever counted to 10 while you're breathing, especially in a warm-up? Did it help calm your mind? Does it sound a little bit like a mantra or mental focus? If you say yes, that's good, it should. It's a trick that many athletes will use. So after that little bit of aerobic activity and breath work, I like to work from the top down, making sure all my muscles are warm. Muscles that are warm from movement and increased blood flow are less likely to be injured than cold, stiff muscles and ligaments. So if you think of your muscles and your ligaments, your tendons, think of them like a piece of Laffy Taffy. If you have a piece of cold, hard Laffy Taffy, it's hard to stretch without breaking it into little tiny pieces. But if you leave it out in the sun and it's nice and warm, that taffy has tons of mobility and a ton of forgiveness, meaning that when you're running around the court and switching different directions, you'll be able to do so easily without the risk of hurting something. Last but not least, save your held static stretches for after the game as part of your cool down. This helps to lengthen muscles that just spent quite a bit of time contracting and relaxing in quick succession. On the back of this warm-up, I've also included some of my favorite cool down stretches. I would love to have a little feedback on that. So if anybody does try the warm-up and cool down, swing by Tanessa or shoot me an email and say what you liked about it or maybe what you didn't like about it. I'd love to know. All right. Oh no, you're injured. Now what? Well, first and foremost, let's go back to the basics. RICE. Rest, ice, compression, and elevate. So, key focus here is to give the area that's injured relative rest as much as possible. Give yourself a little bit of ice. Provide compression, and this can be from the ice pack itself or maybe an ACE bandage, and elevate the area to avoid swelling. I usually advise my patients to use an ice pack for about 10 to 15 minutes as you can tolerate. Some of us are a little bit wimpy when it comes to ice, and that's fine. But for those of us that really enjoy the ice, 15 to 20 minutes is a great area. You always want to make certain to take note of your skin before and after using ice to assess the difference in swelling, bruising, etc., etc. If you're able to and comfortable taking NSAIDs, your Tylenol, ibuprofen, Aleve, use an appropriate dose to decrease your overall comfort. And as always, if you're unsure about the nature of your injury, absolutely consult with a doctor, an occupational therapist, or a physical therapist. And I love this little guy because I know quite a few athletes have this same dilemma. I can't tell if I'm sore from a workout or if I'm seriously injured. So I think this little guy should go see his occupational therapist, doctor, or physical therapist, but that's the advice I'll give you today. All right, moving on to chronic injuries. Now, these are typically the result of an already existing condition. We might think of arthritis, stroke, spinal cord injuries, or they could be the result of overuse that's unresolved or compensation that goes uncorrected. Now, does overuse or compensation sound familiar? It should, because those are the two chronic injuries that started as acute injuries that we talked about earlier. So the number one way to keep a chronic injury from sidelining you is don't ignore it. Again, talk to your doctor. Visit with a PT or an OT. You might also want to talk to your teammates to see if anybody else has experienced the same injury that you have. Get their feedback. So remember this guy that I loved at the beginning? See his wrist wrap? And that's because I have had patients with the chronic wrist pain that use a soft wrist strap just like that whenever they go work a heavy job or when they're playing their preferred sport. I also have patients with reoccurring carpal tunnel symptoms that know how and when to stretch to avoid those symptoms. So my big point here is that management of symptoms is key to living with and playing with any chronic condition. I've added in this slide to say your physical therapist or occupational therapist can educate you over management of injuries or conditions. So whether it's a newly sprained ankle, a chronic elbow injury, a shoulder that's been bothering you for a while, any OT or occupational therapist or physical therapist are experts at helping you manage this injury and get back into the game. So I'll leave you with this final thought. A very famous quote that I'm sure you've heard maybe once or twice before, and that is, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, by our very own Benjamin Franklin. And while he may predate pickleball by a good 200 years or so, his words are still applicable today. So your ounce of prevention, so getting the right gear, improving your physical and mental fitness, and your preparedness for your new favorite game will go a long way in preventing the need for any cure. So whether it's preventing or responding to an injury, I hope that this presentation has provided you with at least some helpful resources to help keep you in the game. Thanks for watching, and if we have any questions at this point, I would love to take them and talk with you guys about pickleball, the new favorite sport. What you need? Yeah, help me out. Sorry, guys.